think that the value in the council is really in the sort of like collective mind that the council is. As much as we celebrate now something like 2040 and getting rid of exclusionary zoning practices, that's not work that came from Jacob at all, right? I'm glad that he champions it. I'm glad that he fought for it. I'm glad that we now agree on that. But like that really is work that came from Lisa Bender's leadership. That's really work that came from Lisa Bender having an intimate understanding of what like staff do, because she used to do that work. And it's that interplay between the people who set the agenda, the people who set sort of the principles, and the people who have the technical know-how of how to execute it. That interplay is a little dead right now. I can't imagine something like 2040 coming to fruition under these conditions. And it's something that we're lauded for all across the country.
Calling out tap people. This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
Maybe you won't want to admit this, but I feel like there was some truth in what you were saying. I'm not like, I never read the book. What's Lord of the Flies? I never read it. I'm going to play the quote so everybody knows what we're talking about right here.
Okay.
I feel like that kid with in Lord of the Flies with the conch shell.
What did you mean by that?
So in the movie, especially, because I grew up on the movie, maybe like probably watched that movie too young now that I think about it. But I grew up on the movie, and for me, Piggy is in that moment when he's holding on to the shell, and he's trying to cling to this sense of order that he should understand has long been abandoned by everyone around him. And, the consequence of him refusing to acknowledge that is that he's, his head gets smashed in with a rock, And so I think for me, it's like, I do feel myself kind of clinging to this notion of productivity that's a little antiquated. And I recognize that. And I feel like I just kind of need to let it go and recognize that the admin and the mayor are going to conduct themselves the way they want to. My colleagues are going to respond in kind, and I think it's basically rational. I don't like judge all of that, or hate it. Well, maybe I hate it, but I certainly understand the rationale and see why it's going that way. But there's a part of me that kind of feels like, man, as much as people pretended to be so annoyed with that old system, nobody is really a big fan of this one. And to some extent, I don't want to purely blame the government restructure. I don't think it's in and of itself the problem, but I think that it enables the problem in a way that the old system didn't.
Let's introduce the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. And if you couldn't guess by his voice, Councilmember Jeremiah Ellison is my guest. He represents Ward 5. He has a career spanning the 4 years prior to the great government restructuring of 2021 and the 4 years after. That is why I wanted to talk to him today, because he's got a perspective that hardly exists. I guess Lene Palmisano would be one that spans that. Andrea Jenkins would span that. But I wanted to talk to you because you've been outspoken over the last couple of months about the problems you've seen there. To start out, like you've said a few things about this already, but like we got scammed in 2021. The idea that the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, the city's reaction to it, failures that people see there, was a result of structure, the so-called 14 bosses. Nobody knew who was in charge, and that's why things failed. That was a message pushed by the business community, people aligned with like the Chamber of Commerce. They funded that effort entirely, the Charter for Change campaign. So that was a scam, right? Well, like in retrospect, what we thought in 2021 that was a scam, that was a scam, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think that like in the best case scenario, it would streamline who's in charge. And I do think that there was certainly some valid criticisms to be had about the the executive committee. That was sort of where the shared powers existed. That's where the strong council's powers existed, was mainly in the executive committee, which was a special committee made up of the mayor, the minority leader on the council president, and like a majority leader on the council. So it was basically 3 council members and the mayor would meet as kind of a special committee to get certain things done. And when I was there, the executive committee, I mean, when it existed, sorry, the executive committee mostly sort of was talked about as if it was a little bit of like a piece of bureaucracy, right? But it certainly got scapegoated as a way to sort of push through a lot of what I think is more than the material changes that were made on paper, right? More than whatever the written changes were. I think that the signal that it sent to everybody in the institution was that staff don't have to work with council. And when you have an institution where it's sort of uncertain whether or not the mayor wants people under his executive authority working with council members in a deeper way, you're going to get some really mixed results. You're going to have some real big growing pains. Whereas before, it was sort of a given. And so that staff had to work with council. We had a lot of internal work groups because we would pass staff directions, not directives. We would pass staff directions that said, hey, this is the issue that we're tackling. These are the people that we need in the room to tackle said issue. And we're going to meet together and come back at date certain with a solution. Now, staff directives, that was about work. Sorry, let me finish that thought. Staff directions were about getting work done. Staff directives are about getting information back, which kind of creates, at least in an institutional sense, this game of telephone. I can't tell you how many times in the staff directions era, you would draft a staff direction, you'd go into a conference room with the staff, and you feel like the direction you gave was pretty clear, right? But staff who know a lot more than you as subject matter experts, maybe to them, when they're trying to parse out how to execute your direction, it's not as clear to them, which then presents sort of a unique opportunity for staff and council to clarify each other's intent. And in that clarification, in that sort of messy work that can't really be done over email, that can't really be done, here's my statement to you, come back to me with information, in that sort of relationship building, a lot of clarity happens, a lot of learning happens, a lot of trust gets built between people, professional trust, maybe not like personal, emotional trust, but like a professional trust gets built. And all of a sudden, unique and interesting solutions can emerge out of that. That's any creative process. With this new era of a staff directive, that miscommunication might still occur. Staff might not quite, as council members, we think we're giving clear direction. Staff might not feel like the direction's as clear. But instead of you being in the room as a part of this work group to sort of parse out any sort of areas where we might be missing each other, you're just sort of left to guess, right? And maybe guess in good faith, maybe guess in bad faith, and then come back with a presentation that's like kind of a lot of information, and nobody knows whether this is the right information. Nobody knows whether this is the information we were looking for. Sometimes council members don't even know because they haven't learned enough about what they're asking for to know whether they're getting the answer that they need. And staff haven't clarified the intent well enough to know whether they're bringing back the information that council wanted. And to me, I think this is where the downward spiral of distrust, of poor communication, of frustration really begins. And people can say, well, my line is open. If so-and-so has an issue, they can give me a call. But giving somebody a phone call when you're frustrated is a different dynamic than sitting in a work group with them and sort of hashing these things out over many, many weeks, maybe months.
What I'm hearing you describe is like having everyone bought in that we are all in this together. Like instead of the old characterization, like, oh, if everyone is in charge, no one is in charge. Right. Maybe it's more like if everyone is responsible, if everyone is bought in, like they're also bought into the solution. Like we get in the same room, we come to a shared understanding of what everyone else is seeing, and like we're all committed to like finding a solution. Whereas now it just feels like sniping from two different people in two different boats, sniping at each other instead of everybody being on the same boat.
I mean, two different boats, two different planes of reality, right? I mean, like, because when I first got in office, I got elected with what I felt like was sort of like a mandate to do some really specific things around housing, around tenant protections, around economic development and commercial ownership in North Minneapolis, right? Yada, yada, yada. I didn't really know how to get from point A to point B on helping a small business go from renting a space to owning a space, right? Like I didn't know the like nuts and bolts. I had an intention, I had a mandate, I had a goal, and a lot of staff are like, they sort of understand what it takes on paper, but they maybe disbelieve that it's even possible, right? So I don't know how it works, but I think it's possible. Staff knows how it works, but suspects it might not be possible. If we work together and all of a sudden my knowledge increases and their sense of what's possible increases, that's a good thing for business owners in North Minneapolis, right? But if we've never developed that, then we're just, to your point, we're sniping at each other from two different planes of existence. They're saying what you want isn't possible. What I'm hearing is you don't care about small businesses in North Minneapolis. Of course, I'm going to be angry if that's what I think I'm hearing. But that might not be what staff's trying to communicate.
Have you run into the problem where your constituents or just regular people in Minneapolis don't understand how things have changed, even though the 2021 election was so greatly defined by that argument over government structure and strong mayor versus the so-called 14 bosses? Like, has it gotten through to people? Are we going to run another election where people blame the council for things they have less power over than they did previously?
I mean, I hate to say it, but I think it might be the latter. And I think the reason is because it's sort of easy to blame the council, right? Now, I don't know how my colleagues' individual races are going to go. My feeling was that, like, especially after the last election, especially getting through 2021, if I was going to be on the ballot this year, this would probably be, I mean, I don't want to speculate, but like this would probably be the easiest election that I would participate in for myself, right? Like that, I kind of gotten to that point. I've built this level of trust. I do have other, goals and things that I want to do with my life, but like I've gotten to that point where it's like this would probably be an easy election for me. I remember Aisha's election was way easier than I thought it was going to be. Jason, Oreen, all did pretty well. The point I'm getting at is that people tend to like their individual council member, right? Like people don't really take too much issue with their individual council member. 2021 was pretty unique for a lot of reasons. I think that the council, when it's all said and done, is going to look pretty similar to how it looks now. But people might still like hate the council, right? I think it's easy for whatever reason, it's pretty easy to scapegoat the council because there's no face. There's a face on your council member, but there's no face on the council, right? There's a face on the mayor. And so, it's kind of like, it's easier to hate a concept than to hate a person. And so the council just always is an easy target.
You can always find one council member that you really hate who represents an entirely different part of the city, people who aren't like you. And that is the council. For me, I may be represented by a council member, Paul Masano, but that Robin Wansley, really gets me. And that's what the council is to me. It is Council President Robin Wansley, who is not council president, by the way.
Exactly. I mean, if you can always find that one council member who's just like, they're in the way. They're in the way of Jacob. They're in the way of the mayor. Any mayor, right? I know that I've been that person for people, right? Who's just like in the way somehow. It's a feature in representative democracy that sort of is deeply flawed. I wish that it was sort of easier to be able to articulate to people like where their opportunity for real change is. But it's incredibly difficult. People still hit me up asking me to do things that are police related, even though like the council's never had authority over that. And, I got to walk them through sort of an education about, this. People still want to interview me about things that are police related, even though, again, this is like not anything the council's ever had authority over. Constituents want a level of, I think constituent services is still a place where the cultural norms are pretty well established, at least for me. And so I'm still able to execute constituent services basically the same, even though structurally, if the enterprise didn't want to let me do that, the enterprise could just not let me do that, right? And make it difficult for me to execute constituent services. I don't know what that's going to look like for the next person, right? So people have maybe gotten used to working with me in a particular manner, but are those benefits going to be passed on to, the next council, future councils? I don't know.
Do people understand you're the old man, the moderate, the guy in the middle, the super pragmatic one? I feel like the difference between the way a lot of people see you and what you actually are is pretty big. I don't know if it's because you have a big name or what.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's kind of been that from the start. I mean, people who know me pretty well kind of know that this is my approach to things, right? And maybe I came in a little bit more of a firebrand, but I remember, and I hope she'd be okay with me telling this story. I remember after getting elected, the first lunch meeting that I had with Lisa Goodman. And Lisa, we sat down and we were talking maybe for an hour, just kind of chopping it up and trying to get to know your colleague. And I remember Lisa just said straight up, as Lisa will do, like, "Oh, I didn't think it was going to be like this. Everybody said I was going to hate you. Everybody said you were going to yell and be angry all the time, and you're just like nice, chill guy." And I do feel like I can't quite articulate it all the way, but yeah, I guess my reputation's kind of like preceded me in this way. Where anybody who talks to me walks away like somehow surprised, even though like by my demeanor, even though my demeanor's not, I would say it's not new. I certainly learned a lot more over my time in council.
It's an opportunity for some Goodman sound clip here.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
Do you miss Lisa Goodman?
In the sense that Lisa was. I learned a lot from Lisa. The Lisas, honestly. Obviously Lisa Bender is just, I feel like somebody who's really criminally undersung in this institution. I know people who both on the right and the left who maybe get mad at me saying that, but I think that we really didn't know what we had in Lisa and Lisa's leadership while she was here. And Goodman, I mean, just so much about the thing that Goodman offered me, even though we don't agree, our worldviews are not really the same, our theories of change aren't really the same. I'd say Lisa was really generous in how she helped me become pretty much like the council's petty expert on housing policy. I mean, she knew it better than anybody, and she passed a lot of knowledge on to me. And I would love to do the same before I go, but I don't know. I don't know that knowledge that I'll be as skilled at communicating it as she was in communicating it to me.
There's been a couple of things. So the Agate shelter funding, where the council was trying to like nail down how much money do we actually have at the city to spend on this? And there was, the mayor said, "Oh, actually the money you just tried to spend, we don't have it. And it's going to cause me to have to cut these things," one of which was North Commons Park. He didn't end up having to cut North Commons Park. So
right.
Hard to say how true any of that was. And then there was another item, what was it? The violence intervention contracts, where they couldn't tell you what the total amount of the contracts was, which made it hard for you to decide, well, can we move this money to the county? We don't even know how much money there is to move. So the council has the power of the purse. And so but you also rely on the mayor's administration to tell you how much money there is, so you can do things with it. Like, is that just an inevitable problem here? Like, is that solvable?
Like, it's solvable and it's not solvable. And what I mean by that is, I think that there's a version of everyone approaching each other in a way where information is shared because nobody feels, too challenged or ego bruised. I think there's a way that this structure could work. It's just that like people in elected office are compelled by like checks and balances. And I think that like the old model made, I talked about that like professional type of trust, right? The old model made trust, at least between staff, like enterprise staff and council sort of necessary as a function of government. And the new model really makes trust a matter of desire. And because the power dynamic is so in the hands of the mayor, it means that like, could the council develop like a posture and a tone that would be pleasing enough to the mayor that the relationship would be better? Maybe, probably, but it doesn't feel very realistic to me. And not because of who the mayor is right now and who's on the council right now. I think any mayor and council would respond better to checks and balances more than they would to like vibes and desire, you know?
You don't sound very optimistic that this mayor or a future mayor could just decide, well, we're going to institute some new norms and practices here that are more in line with the way things used to work. We're going to be more collaborative. Everybody's going to get in a room. You don't sound optimistic that with this structure, like we can establish some better practices.
Yeah, I mean, you would need someone who's really thick-skinned. I mean, I again, being thick-skinned or thin-skinned or whatever, people get kind of annoyed when I use terms like this. But like, I don't know how better to describe it. There will be, I don't want to be like talking about City Hall gossip like that too much, but what I'll say is that you'll have conversations with folks where the entire whether on the council staff, city staff, or admin. So this dynamic can exist at any level here, but you'll have conversations where the bulk of the conversation is about how people were made to feel by other people, how they were made to feel. They felt not fully respected. They didn't like so-and-so's tone. They felt blamed for something that they didn't feel like was fair for them to be blamed for. You're sitting there trying to be like, what is the policy objective here? What is the solution being proposed? Like, what information do I need to know? And instead you're talking about people's feelings. And I don't want to be like totally dismissive of people's feelings. Certainly there's room for that. There can be room for that when we're governing together. But I feel like it occupies entirely too much space in our current government, where sometimes it feels like the lack of communication is because somebody's offended. Okay, I get it. You're offended by how so-and-so asked such and such, but I don't care. I'm trying to get to a substantive result here. I'm trying to see if I see a problem, and I'm trying to see if there's buy-in for a solution. Again, it would require somebody, I think, I think it would require a mayor who says, hey, look, everybody kind of has to just get over it. We're just going to grind through the growing pains of government structure until we've established some better norms. And yes, some people are going to be really shitty towards one another, and you won't like it and I won't like it, and we'll try to check it when we can, but it can't impede the work. Right now, there's a little bit of like a sense that if you're angry enough on the admin side, if you're offended enough by something that a council member has said or a tone that a council member took with you, then you can ignore that person. The work be damned.
I think the fact that we had to deal with these 2-year terms and just like it's permanent campaign mode for city council members in combination with having it be the same year we enact this new government structure probably deepened the pain a little.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the 2-year terms just felt really unnecessary. I don't even think I picked up any new territory. I'd like lost maybe 2 blocks or something, and then I had to like run a whole new campaign because state law says that I can't represent the area that didn't vote for me, but I do represent the area that voted for me. I don't know. I took issue with it, but you run, it's whatever. Yeah. But I do think you're right that it kind of put people in permanent campaign mode, and people do, I think, implicitly just kind of act a little different when they're campaigning. Also, the stakes are a little higher. You need to create a little bit of some lines of delineation.
Let's get you to say something interesting. What do you think about the mayoral candidates this year? Do you have a favorite?
I've been so hyper focused on trying to figure out Ward 5. I think the last thing I want to do is step out of office without like a real strong sense of who I'm supporting, or without meeting with candidates, and without endorsing somebody and supporting someone, all of that kind of stuff. I'm open to all the mayoral candidates. I think everybody's impressive in their own way. I'm probably not going to say anything all that interesting right now, just because I haven't really met with everybody, and that's not for like, lack of people trying on their part. I think, folks who are running for mayor are interested in meeting with all council members. They're interested in meeting with potential constituents and whatever. But I've probably been a little bit, dodging folks until I really have a solid sense of how I can support people over north, because this is a geography that I care. I grew up here. I've now represented this area for almost 8 years. I don't want to sort of like leave the community hanging and, potentially getting representation that I don't think is going to continue the good work that's happened on West Broadway, or that's going to continue the good work on lead remediation or home ownership or whatever. And so, so that's where my focus has been. But I'll probably, I'm going to talk to everybody who's in the mayor's race. I certainly like, several of the candidates, at least 3 of the candidates that are putting themselves out there and campaigning hard right now. And so I gotta figure out what people's programs look like and where I'm going to potentially throw support behind.
So as Minneapolis goes to the polls, like, what is the question we should be asking ourselves before we cast our vote? Is it a government structure question, like how to make government work better? Is it a question specific to public safety? Like, what is the big theme that you would want people to take into the voting booth?
I mean, as much as like, as the old guy, as like the curmudgeon, I don't think there's I don't have a lot of hope that we'll relitigate government structure, right? I don't think that voters are going to be like, that's the issue, and maybe we shouldn't have done it. I think, it'll be 60 years, maybe 100 years before anybody's asking that question again. And maybe people will never ask that question again. I do think that people need to be thinking about leadership, though. It's not just about who knows the most about this topic or that topic. I think people need to be able to ask themselves, can this candidate withstand criticism? Do I think they can work with people who are not going to treat them how they want to be treated, right? I think that there's an impulse among elected officials, because we're human beings, right? But I think sometimes we prioritize our own humanity at the expense of the people that we're representing, because we feel like maybe we don't get treated like humans at a public meeting. And so we're trying to return that energy in kind, or we're not mature enough to handle it, or, we dig in. When you represent 33,000 people or hundreds of thousands of people, I think that on some level, you need to accept the fact that you no longer represent yourself. And that if somebody is coming at you yelling because they're hurt, because they have wrong information or right information about something that you've done, I think there just needs to be an acceptance that a good message cannot be sort of jettisoned just because you don't appreciate the messenger. And I do think that that's a little bit of how at least local government has operated, here. And you've seen it even with candidates who haven't won, but who have set a tone. I'm blanking on, she's actually a constituent, but the woman who was running for county attorney and
Martha Holton Dimick?
Oh my God, just like, do you want us, is it okay to have candidates who can show up in public and be some of the most like vitriolic, xenophobic, Islamophobic people, and they still just get to like exist in community like that, right? We kind of all just kind of accept that person gets to fall short of our values and then still be taken seriously, despite the fact that they've demonstrated that they are like a vile, unserious person. We've got to, as somebody who's going to soon be a part of the voting base and no longer an elected representative, I think that we've got to demand more from the people who say they want to represent us. And we've got to ask ourselves, is this person going to be, it's okay to be emotional. We're human beings, we're emotional creatures, right? But is this person going to prioritize their emotional state and their emotional gratification over my well-being, over the well-being of my neighbor? I think that's kind of what people need to be asking themselves, because issue by issue, my criticisms of Jacob as a leader are not on issue by issue. We don't agree on plenty of issues. He and I have talked about that. I think we've hashed that out in the public in the past. That's whatever. But I think that where he's fallen short, and where I think that somebody, whether it's him or somebody else, needs to step up and do better. It's in really reckoning with this idea of representing others that are not yourself, and making sure that you have tough enough skin to engage with an issue that you're failing. You don't even have to say that you're failing, right? If that's a step too far. But we are not seeing less homeless people on the street, right? We're not seeing that, right? So we can evict people and we can put down rubble on a field, and we can finger wag and gloat when somebody else's solution doesn't come to fruition. And in the meantime, a meaningful solution to the problem is not emerging out of your office. I've never had an issue being wrong. I've never had an issue giving the mayor or any of my colleagues their props. People probably see that me and Latricia have a good relationship. Me and Robin have a great relationship. I try to even me and Michael, sometimes we'll have to trade exchanges on the dais, but at the end of the day, I think he respects my opinion, and it's just, the disagreements are what they are. But I think that it's about being able to develop that thick skin, because the tone you set there, I think, is going to trickle all the way through the enterprise. If it's okay for leadership, for council and the mayor to sort of devolve into petty disputes, then department heads are going to devolve into petty disputes, and their staff are going to devolve into petty disputes, and council staff are going to devolve into petty disputes at their level, and and so on and so forth, out throughout the clerks and the attorneys, and at that point, nobody's really talking to anybody. I think that the value in the council is really in the sort of like collective mind that the council is. Maybe that sounds a little bit esoteric or a little bit woo-woo, but as much as we celebrate now something like 2040 and getting rid of exclusionary zoning practices, that is not work that came solely. That's not work that came from Jacob at all, right? I'm glad that he champions it. I'm glad that he fought for it. I'm glad that we now agree on that. But that really is work that came from Lisa Bender's leadership. That's really work that came from Lisa Bender having a great, an intimate understanding of what staff do, because she used to do that work. And it's that interplay between the people who set the agenda, the people who set sort of the principles in motion, and the people who have the technical know-how of how to execute it. That interplay is a little dead right now. I can't imagine something like 2040 coming to fruition under these conditions. And it's something that we're lauded for all across the country.
Yeah. So I've got a theory. You're calling it quits after 8 years. I've got a theory that a normal human being can't go longer than 8 years doing what you're doing, especially not now. It's a sign that maybe you are a normal person, because Lisa Bender left after 8 years. I had a real rough time at the end personally in the job.
Yeah.
We've seen Mitra Jalali, another council president in St. Paul. It's two people that I really have just so much respect for in local government, had a very difficult time and had to say, now I'm done and I'm going away to take care of myself. And so what do you think about that? Are you going away to take care of yourself?
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, look, on some level, this job is absolutely an honor, right? And there's just no way around it. I know I have to say that on some level, but I'm leaving. I don't have to say that, actually. And so it truly is. Your neighbors all get together, and they don't get together in a room, but your neighbors essentially come together. You compete with other people in an arena of ideas. And they say, hey, look, we think that you're the person that is best equipped to take on some of these challenges. I don't know that I'll ever play that kind of role in my community again. I think that that's something that I'm going to cherish forever. When I ran for office, though, I ran for office with a very clear set policy platform, right? It was long, it was robust, it had things about lead remediation in homes, soil remediation, air quality improvements were in my platform. And I feel like aggressively, with community support, I've been able to really address those things. There were things about affordable housing, home ownership, housing production, tenants' rights. If there's anything I'm proud of the most, it's how innovative I've been able to be, again, working with staff, working with community members, and how we address people's dignity and affordability in the housing realm, especially in North Minneapolis. Some of those things have been pilot programs or one-off programs. Some of those things have been citywide policy, but I'm certainly I walked into office with that agenda, and for the most part, I've executed it. Same thing with economic development. We've got more businesses, we've got more local ownership, we've got more jobs on the north side. It's incremental, especially with COVID kind of being in the middle of all that. But it certainly was a lot of work, and it was more, and I played a role in that. And I might not get a lot of love from the business community, but businesses over north are certainly doing better because of because of a lot of the work that I've done. And even with Philippe Cunningham, for all the new people who aren't old like me, really led in creating the Office of Violence Prevention. And I know that we're kind of going through a rough time with the most recent iteration of that now. But that's another area of innovation that I feel like he created a lane for any of us that were interested in expanding what public safety could look like. Philippe really created a lane for us to play in and help grow. And I've done a lot of work to make sure to make sure that we've got BCR and GVI and violence interrupters as a part of this public safety ecosystem. Sorry, that's a really long way of saying I have completed my agenda. I have completed with little exceptions, with two policies that I haven't done yet and might get done before the year's out. And so, when I was thinking about like what responsibility I had to run again or not run again, as much as this job is an honor, it's not fun. And so if I've done the work that I committed, that I promised to the people of North Minneapolis that I said I would do, and I think that there is plenty of leadership over North that can take my role, and I can be honest and say that the job is really not that fun, and I've certainly lived a lot of lives in this job. I could do another 4 if I felt like I had a lot left to do, but stacking all those things on top of one another felt like 4 more years just wasn't going to be necessary for me.
So your self-esteem is not wrapped up in being a council member. Like, what are you going to go on and do? What are you going to go on and do now? What is next?
I don't want to be like arrogant, but I've got no shortage of skill sets that I can go and apply to the world. I mean, and so that part I'm really, and I've got no shortage of connections as well to whether it's in the arts, whether I want to stay in like the housing realm, where I've learned a ton. If I want to stay even in policy and politics, I think that I'm plenty capable of doing that.
Lobbyist. Jeremiah Ellison, lobbyist extraordinaire.
Well, I mean, unless you want me to go around the country like designing, people's rent control policies or whatever, I could maybe do that. But yeah, I feel like I've learned a lot, so I've certainly done a lot in this job. So my self-esteem's not wrapped up in this job at all. Like I said, it has been an honor, and I don't know if I'll ever do anything sort of like this acutely important. I mean, but I think I got plenty of sort of room in the tank to go ahead and like still contribute to the arts in a major way. I would love to see housing addressed at the federal level. Everybody tells me that's sort of like an empty, like a fool's errand, to try to go and address housing which makes it kind of attractive to me. I'm like, I'm capable of doing things that are impossible. So like maybe that's a place where I want to go and try to fix, Nixon and Reagan's horrible sins against this country when it comes to housing.
In the year 2025, you're thinking about fixing the federal government.
Hey, I mean, look. Hey, yeah, I guess so. I don't think anything is really that impossible. I think that having, and we're certainly in a scary time. I don't want to minimize that at all. But I don't think anything's impossible. And I think that people really want to know that you will go to the mat and fight for them, no matter whether the deck is stacked against you or not. I think that we've got a party, the Democratic Party, if I could be partisan on this podcast, just me, that you don't have to be. But like, I think that the Democratic Party has been just so feckless and spineless, and obviously not every Democrat, not every individual elected Democrat. You've got elected Democrats who are doing great work. But I think that as a party, your people are watching this, and people think, oh, you've got Democrats or Republicans, and people either vote Democrat or Republican, and you've got swing voters. And I don't know. I've been in politics a long time, and I think the concept of a swing voter is just like the fakest thing to me. I think what you actually have is you've got You've got people who vote Democrat, and you've got people who are likely to vote Democrat but don't vote. And you've got people who are Republican, and you've got people who are likely to vote Republican but don't vote. And instead of like this like what's got to be this minuscule like number of people who are like undecided or swing voters, I think we need to let go of this notion. I think that the people who stay at home, they stay at home because you didn't talk to them, because they're disillusioned, or because they watched, Hakeem Jeffries like basically give up on live television. And if you're not somebody who's in politics, that is so deeply discouraging. Like to your average person watching something like that, that's one of the most discouraging things that you can see is, oh, what leverage do we have? It's one of the most nonsense things you can hear from somebody who's supposed to be a leader within at least the closest thing to a movement that you could get behind. I don't think the Democrats take that seriously enough. And instead, what they continue trying to do is being like, well, instead of getting the person who's staying home, how can I get the gun owner to vote for me instead of that guy? Why would the gun nut ever vote for you over the other guy? Why would that ever be a decision that they make? Why would the pro-life person ever vote for you over the other guy? Why is that a decision that they would make? Go get the person who's staying at home because they're not convinced that you give a shit about them at all. Go prove to them that you care and that you're willing to go to the mat, win or lose, and fight for them. I know I sound like I'm campaigning. I'm not campaigning, but I'm just saying these are the things that I think kind of like need to happen. And I don't want to act like the political moment that we're existing in isn't somewhat discouraging. It's just not the reason I'm not running again, right? Like it's not like what's causing me not to run.
Although in this moment in particular, I tend to agree with everything you're saying. In this moment in particular, I would think the pro-lifer or the gun enthusiast would be like, well, if I have my preferences, I would prefer to still have a country, right? I would prefer we not dismantle the country entirely. So this moment, I'll swing over and I will vote for Democrats.
I mean, you'd think so, but like people who don't follow politics all that closely, they do tend to disbelieve just how bad something can get, right? Like, so it all kind of sounds like hyperbole until it's arrived, right? And if you're following it, you're like, this isn't hyperbole, this is real, this is happening. But if you're not somebody who's abundantly plugged in, I've got close friends. I was not quite arguing because they were really receptive to the arguments I was making, but I was out at like a UFC fight. I've got my group of guy friends. We go like watch like boxing matches or UFC fights and all that stuff. They were like wanting to debate like the trans athlete thing. And to them, it was just like they're not plugged in. They're not reading between the lines. And I was really frustrated and I kind of wanted to cuss them all out. These are guys that I trust with my life. I love them to death. But the conversation was just so infuriating to me. And I really had to break down for them what the conversation was really about and why the perspective they were bringing was a violent one. Because they were like, well, I don't want to be violent with anybody. It's like that defensive, like, I don't want to be, that's not what I'm talking about. But it is what you're talking about. You just don't know it's what you're talking about. And they were receptive to that argument. But your average person, like, it's sometimes when I spend a little bit more time around my friends who aren't like plugged in to this stuff, they tend to disbelieve like just how bad it is or how bad it's going to get or, is it really, that big of a deal? And convincing them that it can be really, really difficult, especially if they're already to the point where they're like, Doge is funny and this is all just a big joke to me. You're better off getting the people who are already outraged but are not convinced that you will do anything.
So when the country falls apart and we no longer have a country or a federal government, what do you do for fun? What are the essential things that you have to recommend to the audience? What do you like?
I'm a book reader, man. I love reading. I am right now just finished reading Sula by Toni Morrison. Great book that I would recommend. It's short. It's like 180 pages or less. So if you're somebody who's a little bit intimidated by a book, I'd say go grab that book. If you're somebody who doesn't read in general, I always find that like short horror novels. Sula's not a horror novel, but it is short and beautiful and it's Toni Morrison, what can you say? But like The Ballad of Black Tom, really short book. Annihilation. It sounds like a really intense title, but Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. Go read it. It's fun. It's a horror novel. It's an ecological horror novel. I definitely think people should read more. Other books I'm reading are Poisoner in Chief It's about the MK Ultra CIA program where they tried to develop mind control drugs. It's a bit of a just wacky history that I think is really interesting and that I feel like we don't know enough about. And then I'm reading this book called Regeneration Through Violence. It's like a tome on the frontier mythology, American frontier mythology. So I'm also reading that. But if you don't want to read 1,000-page academic novel or academic texts, you can read 150-page novellas, and you will still learn a lot about human beings and about the world. And I'm a big believer in both fiction and nonfiction. I know a lot of people who are like readers are like, you got to read all these serious books. You don't have to read all these serious books. You can read fun books as well.
Yeah. This is why Jeremiah Ellison makes all the most compelling arguments during council meetings. He's constantly reading, just buries himself in words, and then they come out of his mouth wonderfully at the end. Well,
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member Jeremiah Ellison. Best of luck to you in your future endeavors.
Yeah, thank you.
This has been the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. Thank you for listening.
Calling all cat people. This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.